What is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm actually trying something a bit different, so apologies that you can see the leg here on my tripod. I'm going to sort out a setup so that I can actually use my proper camera above the SPs in the new year. I've actually been using my iPhone historically on the channel, but I really want to get that quality higher for you guys, so I've got the DSLR above here at the moment, and hopefully it's a really crystal clear image, and I just need to sort out some way of being able to do this without having the tripod in the way. So I think I should be able to buy a kind of boom extension, or maybe even something that mounts on the wall like a bracket so that it can film above with ease. But for now, yeah, there will be legs in this one, but I do think it's worth it for the better picture quality. Anyway, let's get on with the topic of this video. I wanted to talk about my workflows on the SP404 MKII so far. So I've been making quite a lot of beats with this over the past couple of weeks. You may have seen that I'm now on TikTok uploading on there. I've been uploading shorts on this channel as well, which is something brand new to me. So I've been making a lot of beats and I've been getting into a workflow. So I wanted to talk you through what I've been doing. So if you are watching in the future, check out the latest videos on my channel to see if anything's been updated, to see if anything's changed. I will post content about my personal experience with this device in the coming months, obviously. So just make sure to go and check if you're watching this, say, 6 months, a year on, and may have changed my workflow. So first things first, I'm doing very much the same with recording in samples. The only upgrade on this, which is actually a massive one, it's super handy, is I'm just recording straight through the USB cable into my device now. So I've got cables set up here at the moment, but that's for recording this video. They're not required at all for my setup at the moment. I'm recording directly in through the USB. All I have to do on my Mac is set it as an output for the sound, and the sound comes straight into the device. When the samples are coming in, I haven't tended to be using effects on them too much. That's something that doesn't really differ from the old SP. It is sometimes a lot easier to add one layer as soon as the sample's coming in so that you've already got one to start stacking on. It's entirely up to you guys, that one really. It's personal preference, but for me, I've been recording them in vanilla basically. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of EQ if I want to tone down a certain frequency. Maybe if it's a bit too boomy or if it's a bit too trebly, I may use a bit of EQ. But yeah, generally speaking, the samples have been coming in pretty vanilla. And I think the main reason for that really is that I tend to downpitch my samples a lot. So there's no real point putting effects on until you've already downpitched it, and then you can start playing with things and see what it sounds like. So yeah, that's the first step, recording things in through the USB cable. Very much like I used to on the SX, apart from that it's a lot easier because I can just do it directly through the USB cable. So the size of my samples, I've been varying between chopping little bits and doing full sort of segments of songs. Now I did talk about this in a previous upload, that doing loads of multiple little recordings gets really tedious on the Mark II because of the little window that you get to confirm that you've recorded something. It lasts just that a little bit too long and it really upsets your workflow. So I've been slowly weaning my way off that for now and doing large chunks of sound. Those can then be chopped using the chop feature, which is contained within this device now, and that's another super nice new feature that we've got available to us. So on the whole, I'm trying to record bigger sections in, but I have recorded tiny sections in a lot and just use those. It's kind of varying at the moment, so I'm trying to change an old habit there with that one. So yeah, then I'll probably use the chop. So I've got a sample in here like this. And then this one is actually just one loop, one very long loop from a record. So I didn't do any chopping on this one, but yeah, I'd go into shift and chop if I wanted to chop. I'd choose chops where I want them to go and then put those on the pads. Or if I've been recording in the other way, the chops are already ready. So then the next thing that I would do is make sure they're all in a mute group. So it's super simple to set up mute groups on this device, and they're really handy. It's a new feature as well. So one example of my chop samples in a mute group, if I go to bank C on my device and I go shift 8, which is mute groups, and I scroll across to C, I tend to keep the mute group the same as the bank if I'm only using one. So there you can see I've got 4 pads all in a mute group, and if I just come out of that and then play those, you can quite clearly hear there that they're muting each other out when you play the next pad. And to make that as effective as possible, I turn gate off on all my samples so that I'm not having to press and hold them. Otherwise, there is literally no point in using the mute group whatsoever, because you could just release and press the next one. So they've all got gate turned off and they're all inside a mute group, so they just cancel each other out. The only disadvantage of that is obviously stopping them all at the same time. You have to just keep smashing exit all the time to mute the sounds if you want it to stop like this. Or you could use the old trick like we used to on the SX and just hit record as well, which is a good time saver. So this is an example of that. The sample will be playing. Just press record and then press exit, and that stops all the sounds as well, and it's a lot faster than having to press exit like that all the time. Okay, so we'll have recorded a sample in, chopped it, etc., done what I've wanted to do, put it into a mute group, and then the next thing that I'll probably do is get some drums in here so I can show you the import area of the device. So I think the SD card is causing a bit of confusion with this device. The way that you look at this device is that it's got 16GB internal memory, and then you've got the SD card. You can have a maximum of 32 gig, but you have to look at that as a kind of portable external storage area. So it's got nothing to do with the internal memory of the device. It's literally just like carrying around a memory stick with you that you can plug into the device, but it's actually got its own slot in the side of the machine. So you can save stuff to it, you can pull stuff from it when you please, and that will go onto the internal memory, or it'll get taken from the internal memory onto the SD card. So you don't need an SD card to get going with this device, but you will need it to import and save things onto. So I will go to Shift Import, and the first time you go through this menu, it's actually kind of slow at finding the SD card. So you'll see here, if I import from SD card now, I'm going to choose to do that with the value dial. You see how there's a little delay there, and if I press sample because I want to import a sample, SP vids, and then I'm inside my packs. And I can go ahead and browse through these. I can choose my hats folder. If I don't want anything from there, I can come back. I can go to kicks, etc., etc. If you want to highlight more than one sample to import, you can do Shift and use the dial like that, and it highlights loads of them. And then what you can do is import all those at the same time. So what you'll do here, you can see I've got the three pads. You'll hit a pad, you'll choose the sample that you want to import onto it. So I'll do hi-hat 1 here on 9. So 9, so it says that I've selected C9 now. And then I'm going to do hi-hat 1. And it's literally as quick as that. And there's the hi-hat. The only problem with the importing where it gets a bit tedious is that if you want different things from different folders, you have to keep going back into this area. Now, like I mentioned, the second time that you go back in, it finds the SD card straight away. You can see it's a little bit quicker. This is a little bit of an annoying workflow, but unfortunately that's just the way it is. I can't seem to be able to import a hi-hat, say, for example, let's say I want to put hi-hat 1 on 9 and then put hi-hat 3 on 10. You basically can't do that at the same time. You can't assign different samples to import onto different pads at the same time. You can either do that block sort of importing like I did with the highlight in there, or you have to do it one at a time. So it's a little bit slow, it's a little bit tedious, but once you get into the flow, it's quite nice. And obviously having that option there is just amazing. We haven't had that in previous SP models. I was having to use my A bank to store loads of drums on and then copy them across and chop them at the right point so that you get the right sound, etc., etc. So it's a lot less cumbersome, but it just takes a little bit of time to get those samples in there. You just have to be a little bit patient with that. So we've got everything in there that we want now. We've got samples, and then we've got the drums as well. So we've got chop samples or looped or however we want to do it, and then mute grouped, and we've got the drums imported. You could obviously record your own drums in and chop those up. Say if you did a break, that's obviously very easy to do with this device as well. So however you want to do that is up to you. I always import my drums from the SD card at the moment. So then I would basically just start mapping out ideas with the chops. I would start jamming around trying to find ideas like that, and then what I would probably do next is start to look for effects that I want. So this is how I've been using bus 1 and 2, and this isn't necessarily the correct way or the right way to do it. This is just the way that I've naturally seemed to be using this area. So I won't be using bus 3 and 4 at all at the moment. I've got it in the effect settings as blank because I want to do those effects right at the end when I've finished everything else. So I'll basically be using 1 and 2 a lot. So 1, I use bus 1 to put effects on my samples, and I use bus 2 to put effects on my drums. Now I've found that most of the time with bus 2 I've been using isolator. So go across to bus 2, now I've got isolator, and if you hit remain you can see that the green ones at the bottom are the 3 drums, and they've got the isolator on. Now obviously that's not the sound that I'd want, so to be honest most of the time I'm just taking off a little bit of the highs. And then it's really personal taste and depends on the track to what effect I put in bus 1. So I may just put cassette for this just to show you guys cassette because it's a nice effect. And that's the beauty of bus 1 and 2. We've got the one effect on the samples only and the one effect on the drums only. So then we get something that sounds a little bit like this. And I've also been using that old trick from the SX, which I think I kind of came up with. I did a video about it years ago where you use the vinyl sim, but only sample the noise. So I would just record what's happening now into a pad, and then you get something like this. And that just means you get more control because you can still use that effect if you wanted to, but you don't have to have it on permanently. You can change the level of that in the mix. You can put effects on it. So you could do some crazy stuff with this, like say like we wanted to do scatter on that effect. Obviously that's hypothetical, but you get the idea. You can experiment way more with just that noise that's going along underneath the track just by resampling it to another pad. So I'd have that running underneath, and what that does is it just adds a little bit of depth, and obviously it adds that lo-fi sound as well. Okay, it's not authentic, it's just simulating that vinyl crackle basically. Okay, so that's essentially what I'd do. I'd have my ideas ready. Now, this could go one or two ways after this. I could resample all the parts to separate pads if I wanted to. I haven't been doing that much. I've actually been doing my old method, which is a bit lazy. I'll record a drum loop to a pad, and then I'll play the chops along, and I'll just record that out live via the USB cable into Ableton. Now, I know that's really lazy, but that's just the way I've worked on the SP for so long that I'm still trying to break old habits, like I've mentioned earlier on in the video. But I have been doing resampling as well, so I could resample all those different bits to the different pads and then have loads of different parts to play in whatever order I wanted to, and then I would record that out to Ableton. Or because of the massive resample time, you could play all the different resampled parts onto one pad so that you get the full track. I have had a little bit of interference with the resample. If you do it for a long time, you get little skips and crackles sometimes, so that's why I've been doing it straight out into Ableton. I will go back and investigate that a bit more and probably do a video about it, but yeah, it can get a bit frustrating if halfway through it just has a little skip or something like that. I'd prefer to just do it into Ableton and know that I'm going to get the full take. Obviously, there's the option for pattern mode as well. I'm not a pattern mode person, so I haven't been using that at all, to be honest. I will look into it at some point, but it's not the workflow I've ever enjoyed on the SP, so I haven't been using that. And then the final little thing would be to, A, play around with the drums, and I'd probably pitch them to kind of fit in the mix a little bit more. And that's another thing that I probably should have mentioned as well earlier, is that I always tend to pitch the samples as well. I think I did mention it, but I didn't talk about actually doing it or show doing it. So it's hard to know when to do this, because if you do it as soon as you're recording the big chunk of audio, then it's easier, because then when you chop it up, it's already all at that pitch. If you don't do that and then decide you want to pitch it later, you have to go through each individual sample and re-pitch it. Now, hopefully Roland come up with an update for that so you can re-pitch multiple samples at the same time. That would be amazing, and it would save so much time. Yeah, but for now, I have spent a lot of time individually going through samples and repitching them to the same pitch, so that can get really, really tedious. But unfortunately, it's not always easy to know what's the best pitch immediately once you've got a sample in there, so you do have to do some experimentation. And yeah, like I've mentioned in previous uploads as well, I've started pitching up my drums a little bit because it makes them a little bit snappier. I tend to pitch up my snares nearly all the time just to give them more slap, and hi-hat wise, it can vary. Sometimes I pitch it down to fill out the mix a little bit, or sometimes I pitch it up just so it's got that really, really clean sort of knocking sound to it. So the final thing that I then do is go to the effect settings and play around with my bus 3 and 4. Now, these are the ones that I've been using the most and I've got set up here. So I've got isolator and 303 vinyl compression at the same time. I've then got bypass and just equalizer, and then I've got bypass and just 303 vinyl sim. So they're the three main ones that I've been using so far. I will build more in the future, but for now they're the three that I'm using the most, I would say. Isolator and 303 vinyl sim, that's a really killer combination. You get a nice warm tone out of it. Bypass and equalizer, again, it can just help to improve the mix of the overall beat. Just the compressor, sometimes you don't need that isolator, so that's why I've got that one like that. And they're the three that I've been using the most. So that's the full walkthrough of my workflow at the moment. Like I say, this is subject to change massively, and I've no doubt it will change over the next few months, but that's the main way I've been building beats on this device at the moment. I hope this was insightful for you guys. There's some big changes to the workflow when you get this device, so it is both an interesting and also frustrating experience at first, getting your head around all this and working out the best way to make beats. If you want to go ahead and copy my workflow, that's absolutely fine. I really strongly suggest you try and find your own though. You've got to find what works best for you. Don't just copy what I do. You may find a workflow that works better for you personally due to different requirements of your workflow, so it really is up to you to experiment and find the best one that works for you. I hope this information was useful, guys. I'll be back with more content very soon. Keep making beats on whatever devices you own, and I hope those Mark IIs get to you as quickly as possible. Peace!